you would do if you wanted to find the answer, which is to compare outcomes in a fully vaccinated group to health outcomes in an unvaccinated group. And CDC did that study in 1999. They brought in a team of scientists under a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, and they looked at the data. They looked at children who had received the hepatitis vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compared those children to children who had received the vaccine later or not at all. And they found an 135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. And all of those studies were the subject of that kind of trickery.
Trickery. RFK Jr. is once again out here spreading misinformation when he just doesn't understand science and the scientific process, that the CDC found a 1,135% increased risk of autism from the Hep B vaccine and covered it up. That number, totally made up. It doesn't appear in any CDC study, peer-reviewed paper, or even the transcript he keeps referencing. It's a number meant to sound smart and scare people. And what he's referring to wasn't even about Hep B alone. It was looking at thimerosal-containing vaccines and many neurodevelopmental conditions. And the transcript from this conference that he mentions, it's not a secret. It's public record right here. You can read it from the 2000 Simpsonwood conference, where doctors, scientists, and public health experts reviewed early vaccine data together. This was not some backroom cover-up. It was a normal part of the scientific process to look at early data, ask questions, analyze for missing factors like genetics or environment, remove variables that skew data, then recommend and do better studies. This is how science works. He's literally describing the scientific process and making it sound like it's a cover-up when it's how science literature works. That's what happened. But for over 20 years, RFK Jr. and people like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, a well-known anti-vax figure, have twisted that meeting into a conspiracy theory. They've recycled this narrative since 2005 when RFK Jr. published a now debunked article called Deadly Immunity in Rolling Stone and on Salon.com. It was retracted, discredited, but here he is again pushing the same false claim, and now he holds real power in public health. Why now? Because the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee, ACIP, is currently reviewing the childhood vaccine schedule, including Hep B and MMR. And RFK Jr. is trying to stir up fear just as that process is happening. Let's actually look at what the Simpsonwood transcript says. There does not appear to be a causal relationship between ethyl mercury, thimerosal, and neurodisorders. There was a weak early signal, but it was just that, preliminary and not fully analyzed. The researchers admitted key factors like genetics and environment weren't accounted for in the data. And diagnoses weren't consistent. One group had 2 or 3 times more cases, likely due to overdiagnosis or differences in how conditions like ADHD were labeled. That's not proof. That's scientists saying, hey, we need to study this better. And the many iterations he refers to are designing a better study, not burying data. And that's exactly what they did. Dr. Stein, a pediatrician there, even said this: we're not even sure these kids were properly diagnosed and if the design setup makes sense to make conclusions. So no, it wasn't a scandal. It was the scientific process doing its job. Let me put it this way. If I claimed that bubblegum caused speech delays, I'd be expected to show my data, explain how I diagnosed those delays, account for everything else that could cause them, confounding variables, and have other experts check my work before it's published. Having a thought or even a research study isn't legit until it's scrutinized. That is how real research works. And that's exactly what happened here. More studies were done, adjusted for missing factors, including the lead author who initially presented the non-thorough data and published the final results in Pediatrics in 2003. After looking at over 140,000 kids, they found no link between vaccines and thimerosal. But RFK Jr. and Tenpenny aren't interested in that. They're not here for the truth. They're here for clicks, outrage, and chaos. And now they're using their platforms to influence real public health policy. So let me say this clearly. Vaccines don't cause autism or developmental delay. Being neurodiverse is not something you get from a vaccine. Preliminary data isn't proof. And there was no suppression, just real scientists doing real science. RFK Jr. isn't exposing a secret, he's recycling a 25-year-old myth that he also was a part of at the exact moment our vaccine schedule is under review. That's not accountability, that's manipulation. If someone says, didn't the CDC admit this in 2000? No. They asked a question, then they answered it with better science. Please save this, share it. Disinformation spreads fast. Let's make the truth go faster. Our kids and public health deserve nothing less.